wonderful. Thank you.
And everybody's going to have to turn on their microphones in order to be heard.
Alrighty, so it's, yep, are we good? So it's 10:33. This is a workshop to discuss, I guess, some final items with the DGA and fee structure that's going to be articulated for EC West. Are we videoing or just audioing? Or? Okay, so they can see who's in the room. But again, it's a workshop open to the public. Public comment isn't invited, but just a discussion amongst ourselves. I would ask that folks use the microphones, and with that, I guess if we could roll through, where are we at now? I mean, I think if it's a point of contention, at least what's really being discussed is how do we just articulate within the DGA what fees are going to be, and then I guess,
sure,
for my benefit, are we talking impact fees, building permit fees?
Yeah,
future planning fees, or just a subset of those, or all of them?
So I can tell you kind of where I think we are and how we kind of got to request this particular workshop was, looking at development moving forward. There's been some requirements that we have been taking a look at for pretty much all development. And one of those things that we've been pretty consistent on up to this point is for new developments, not developments that have previous entitlements and approvals. We've essentially said that the fees associated with that development will be accrued or paid at what the rate is on those schedules the date the permit's pulled or the activity is commencing. So, for example, an impact fee, if that's pulled in February of 2025, whatever the fee schedule is at that time, that would be the amount that's due and expected to be paid. I think certainly for EC West in particular, there was a request that was made that was contrary to that, and I believe all three of you guys heard that. But it would impact, essentially that development and potentially any other development moving forward. Where I think there's some concern that fees could be hiked beyond what would be reasonable based on other local governments in the state that have made substantial increases in their fees and costs. And for us, the way that we have it scheduled and set up now is we have our fees and costs kind of structured and tracking CPI. And CPI is plus 1% is essentially how it is. And I think the concern is there needs to be, or their request is for more certainty, because that particular approach could be changed. So I think there's an ask that there's, I guess, more of a fixing of that particular cost beyond just saying, hey, this is how we do our fees moving forward is CPI plus 1%. That's what we're tracking. I think there's a request for kind of some more particularity on that aspect, and I'm sure Tim can expand on that.
Sure.
Just kind of expanding on that, if I understand it correctly, if future or us county commissioners want to change that, you have to go through a third-party nexus, and I'm not sure I've got the name right, presentation, study, recommendation?
Well, you should. I think statute expects, and the regular practice expects what's called a nexus study, which takes a look at the, what cost inputs actually are, what inflation has been, and what fees really should be in relation to that fee schedule. And so usually you're supposed to be doing about every 4 to 5 years, you should be doing that to make sure that your costs are in line with what you're actually charging. So that's how it should be done. I can say that's not always how other local governments have done it, but that's how we've done it, certainly within the recent past.
If I could just, to identify the rub point, like I said, there's planning fees that generally aren't, compared to the project, total project cost, aren't tremendous regardless. I think the building permit fees, impact fees are probably the largest that impacts the potential cost of a lot. So, that's where the nexus report is. So are there things we're good with, like the planning fees that are consistent for any project throughout the county? Is that an issue? Keeping those, I'm just trying to neck down to where are we all fees? Each set of fees is a little, is calculated differently. The impact fees are definitely a nexus report that should be done periodically to make sure they're straight. So building permit fees are generally on the construction cost index that we get periodically, and then planning fees really shouldn't exceed the cost of the service that's provided in terms of that. So there's 3 different sets of calculations, 3 different fees. I just don't want to, as we go forward, that we're either talk about each one of those independently. And
I think the real concern's either a new fee that doesn't exist today or existing impact fees.
Okay.
And this started in light of developers agreements, which obviously apply to, call it, larger infrastructure projects. And I think we can really talk in that light. And I'll use an example of, like we were just talking about, Parker Water and Sanitation and the tour you guys just took. But one of the things we've been working with your planning department on is a recharge system at EC West. So specifically what that means is during the heaviest rains, big flood sessions, we actually store a portion of that, which of course alleviates the stormwater infrastructure and helps prevent washouts, et cetera. But then it takes that water and injects it down to recharge the aquifers. So this is part of what's coming out of like...
The aquifers that you produce from, or the shallower aquifers that you...
Don't know yet, and part of that will depend on future reservoir studies and what all that is. But yes, the goal is ultimately to turn that from a more finite resource to a renewable resource while also mitigating flood impacts. But this is a large infrastructure project and not the sort of thing that's paid back at a building permit. So that's really the purpose of kind of what a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here, for those bigger upfront dollars that are then amortized over the longer term, giving an investors comfort that there's not going to be a surprise event later on that prohibits and discourages those larger infrastructure projects. And this could apply to Econ Dev as well.
And I can tell the board that one of the things that I have been taking a look at as far as fees and a surprise fee in the future, I can't really predict, I don't think any of us can really predict what the state legislature is going to do. There may be new mandates, new requirements that become part of law that we are going to have to charge for. And so simply saying that there's not going to be any new future fees, I think is probably unrealistic based on that potentiality alone. But I also want to give Claire an opportunity to say anything if
Sure.
she wants to say something, and she's joining us through Zoom.
Yeah, and Tim, I want to make sure that you are finished with whatever you want to say, and then I'm happy to jump in so we're not ping-ponging back and forth for folks.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so I want to start by first of all thanking you all for taking the time to have this conversation. Bart set it up exactly correctly with what it is that the concerns are. And I just want to be really clear that we agree with the maxim that development should pay its own way. But we also agree that with these larger PUD developments that contain substantial public benefits, such as the water infrastructure that Tim's talking about, the attainable and the affordable housing, there's a lot of risk that comes with that in terms of financial risk and long-term investment in the community. And right now, the developer bears all that risk, and that's fine. What we're asking you to do is limit that risk where you have the ability to do so. And that is in giving us a blueprint for what your impact fees that you have control over are going to look like. Are they going to be the CPI plus 1%? We can plan around that. We accept that. But what we have seen is in communities like Elizabeth and Fort Collins, these fees have skyrocketed, and they do it with very little public notice, and they do it to backfill other areas, quite frankly, of their budgets. And when that happens, you end up with these large-scale developments that can only get halfway built. And at the end of the day, those public benefits, that housing, that water, that benefits your community. And all we're asking is for you all to kind of show the math and help us assess the risk and limit it where we can. So if we can have a code provision that says something like, for developments of this scale, right? Because one size doesn't fit all in these situations. But for developments of this scale that have these significant public benefits, we agree that the impact fee escalation is CPI plus 1% for these projects, or that it matches whatever the vesting schedule is that that developer has negotiated with the county. So that's what we're looking to do here. Whether that's a code change would be super helpful to kind of show the math in the code. Obviously, that's not a guarantee for us, because later down the road, you all could change that if you felt that it was necessary. But it gives us some certainty right now in securing financing and incurring debt and those sorts of things. So ultimately, the unfettered escalation or the unforeseen increase is going to hurt the community because it puts those public benefits at jeopardy. And that's the problem we're looking to solve in this conversation with you. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for that. I guess on the, specifically to the Nexus studies, again, my experience is only with one county. So are there, I guess, generally there's supposed to be it's supposed to be a third-party study. Have there been, you've talked about other communities that have maybe with, little notice or little public process and have raised fees. Have those been based on a Nexus study that was done, or are people given this? I guess is the impression that those Nexus studies by reliable third parties, can the books be cooked, or are those coming out with decent numbers and then a local government is monkeying with what comes out of it? I'm just trying to see where controls might be put in place locally.
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful question. I would never want to accuse a municipality of cooking their books, so I want to be really, really clear.
Yeah, I'm trying not to dance around what we're trying to get to as much.
No, absolutely. But I think that there's a lot of gray. I think that sometimes they're based on a Nexus study, sometimes they're not. I think the Nexus study is incredibly helpful. I think the public process is incredibly helpful. I think, but I think if the county commissioners would consider that perhaps these Nexus studies for these large projects wouldn't hit in terms of impact unless they're tracking the vesting schedule. And so what I mean by that is, so for instance, we come in with EC West and we are at, level 1 with what impact fees are today. That's where we start. So for 10 years, while we're building out that public infrastructure, if we can be guaranteed the CPI plus 1%, because we're not asking to not pay our way, but that there isn't a Nexus study in the middle of that that says, oh, you know what, we need to increase this by 20% in year 5. That is going to completely derail these projects. So that's also the problem that I'm trying to solve for. Yes, the Nexus study is a piece of it, but being able to hold and identify what the inflation and the costs will be for blocks, significant blocks of time, is critical for these developers.
Like I said, I think we're
And
coming
Tim,
up.
do you have?
We're coming up on about the
add?
5-year mark for our last study, and I think we probably went more than a decade between in the last time. So I know our effort has been to be more regular in this. But.
And I'll just remind everybody that this is not a meeting where particular decision making is going to occur. Okay, this is kind of a discussion that may facilitate something at a future time as far as a decision-making process. But I think, part of the discussion has been kind of a shifting request also. And I think, at one point, I think CPI plus 1% was acceptable, and that was kind of the ask. And that wasn't something that, as the negotiating party for the county on that particular issue, that wasn't really the direction that I had up to that point and whatnot. And I think now, with what Claire just kind of communicated, I think if I interpreted that correctly, it'd be to have a fixed fee for that period of vesting schedule that we kind of have. I could be misinterpreting that, but kind of set fees for that particular vesting period, because we have several, kind of have 10-year periods, if I recall correctly, that are, that's currently what the draft is for the development guide agreement. And I think that would be pretty close to what Independence was as far as having a fixed fee. And I think that was pretty roundly rejected by me as far as having a fixed fee. I think that would be great, and I think that was an ideal aspect of what the entitlement for Independence had. But I think we need to be pretty clear what the ask is, and if there's going to be any movement on the schedule. Yeah, go ahead, Claire.
Yeah, was that?
Right, sorry,
I didn't hear fixed. I heard fixed. I heard plus 1% each year during that.
We want to. That's exactly right. We want to agree to a formula. So it's not that it stays the same from year 1 to year 10. It's that we agree to the formula. So the formula being CPI plus 1% each year until year 10. Maybe we relook at it at year 10. Maybe we relook at it at year 20. Whatever that formula is, so that they can budget and finance, and we're not halfway through a project and have to walk away.
Yeah, I might have misunderstood that. I guess kind of where I was looking at it was when you're saying, year 4, year 5, a Nexus study really could say, hey, we haven't kept up appropriately, and so costs could jump at year 4, year 5 if that Nexus study is completed. If the financial model really does need to change. So I think, if we're okay with saying that that's kind of what you're looking at, is just figuring out what the model would look like, even if we do a Nexus study year 4, year 5, and that would drive what those fees are moving forward. In year 5, Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't know that I'm being clear, Bart, so forgive me. So what I'm saying is year 1, your Nexus study came in at, say, $1. So we would agree to $1, say that's the CPI, plus 1% for 10 years. If your Nexus study came in at 15 at year 5, that wouldn't impact us until we hit year 10 and we recalibrated everybody with the new Nexus study. And then for the next 10 years, we did this new Nexus study plus 1%. Does that make it more clear? It's so hard when I can't see people. I feel like I'm talking into a black box, so I can't read the expressions on if I'm making sense to people or not.
Well, I think I'm tracking, and certainly invite others to talk. I guess where we're struggling is we were very behind in getting our Nexus studies done and having fees set to you know, on a rational basis, on a study, independent study basis. And, you know, our endeavor is to get, you know, those to not run more than about 5 years apart, so we can have, you know, a valid number to work with. Now, how that works with vesting and other, I mean, and obviously try not to get to just a single project here, because, you know,
Correct.
if we were
Correct.
to do a study this year, you know, at every 5 years is neatly divisible by a 10-year vesting for a specific project, but another project coming in 2 years behind. I mean, over time, there's going to be different projects in different windows, so.
And I think that's part of the appeal and approach that we've tried to take from the county side of things is the administrative burden of trying to figure out exactly what somebody's trying to pay. We wanted to avoid that, you know, but we also wanted to make sure that fees and the revenue that the county is receiving is commensurate with what costs actually are, and that you're not going to have, you know, one development paying a different fee for impacts in year 5 or year 6 than a brand new development that's just starting out year 5 or year 6 is going to be paying. And it sounds like that, you know, again, maybe I'm not tracking 100% with what's actually being asked for, but I think that scenario could occur in the process that has most just recently been outlined here at this meeting.
But where the consistency comes in for anyone is, first of all, it would need to be development of a certain size and scale with public benefits as part of it. And if developer 1 had that lockstep increase, we're still talking about CPI, we're still talking about a 10% increase in fees for that developer. I would hope that the fact that you guys have updated your fees in the not so distant future would mean that we're going to be in that ballpark. The next developer who comes in, say they come in at our year 5, they're going to get the same lockstep. We're not asking for something different that other developers wouldn't get. The benefits would just come at different times for the phases of the project.
Yeah, and you'd have to be doing the math on the different rates is the thing, and there'd be an administrative demand to that. So that, I mean, that would dispel with that particular benefit. But I hear what you're saying.
I think that would be on the developer to do the math and show the math and provide an affidavit, whatever it is, so that we're not burdening the county with doing the math and figuring it out. It would be more of just a check, yes, this is correct.
I am too. Said, but once we start with a current fee or the new Nexus base, then it's just grade 6 math, multiplying it by the CPI. Let's say the CPI is 4%, so then we'd increase the rate annually or the next year by 5%.
Correct.
Am I looking at too simplistically?
So,
No.
In terms of what would be allowed per an agreement like this, yeah, you're exactly right. So basically there's a 20% contingency on top of what CPI has been for the last 10 years, right?
So I guess, where am I going with this? The thought is there. I just have to pull it out. All right, so I guess your cost risk versus, so you're developing horizontal, you sell lots, the developer or a builder comes in to pull permits. It's the builder that's paying the impact fee. I mean, are we looking at limiting some pressure on lot price escalation? Because it's not really directly, the impact fees are paid by the home builder to the county for.
So in most cases, it would be the home builder who actually pays this fee. But it gets much more complicated, and I do understand your comment.
Yeah, so that's where I was trying to, if you could.
The builders are also paying like a water and sewer fee. And so if, say, a rogue fee came up of X dollars, then in terms of market economics, that is the same X that needs to come out of somewhere else in the project. And that's what could potentially, say, bankrupt a water district.
You mentioned earlier on that you're looking in the future for reuse of the water and some things like that. Would that be financed, managed, I'm not sure what the right term is, by a metro district?
So that would be by a water and sand district, yes.
I mean, our, and again, I know you're trying to insulate future risk. Our current practice is nexus report plus CPI plus 1% each year, and understand that anybody who's sitting in these seats can adopt different regulations over time. Do you perceive, and I guess it's back to my inelegant cooking of the books question, but is there confidence that, I mean, is your risk mitigated if changes only occur with an Nexus report plus CPI? I mean, if at the 8-year mark or the 5-year mark we were to do a new Nexus report,
So presumably,
set the clock at that point
so presumably the Nexus report is what guides it, and
Right.
it's not Nexus plus something, it's whatever
Right,
the Nexus is.
Yeah.
And then a rational head would probably say the Nexus is going to look a lot like consumer price index, construction price index, something along those lines. Where this gets more complicated is if we're building, say, a reuse system or a recharge system or a potable water system that needs a 30-year amortization schedule, then it would be better to have certainty that there is at least a guardrail in terms of that timeline.
Because again, I know what we do what we have as current practice and regulation can change. What goes in an agreement is going to be that agreement unless whatever terms for changing an agreement might exist in the agreement. So I understand the certainty piece of making it into an agreement versus a regulatory framework.
In terms of like more policy, like maybe even some sort of like an infrastructure scale or an economic development scale, that it kind of ties back to the justification for this. So if someone's spending, $100,000 on one well for one residential lot, that probably doesn't justify something along these lines. But if it's a $2.5 million redundant system that's going to the deeper aquifers, et cetera, then this sort of policy kicks in.
Yeah, I wanted to put this meeting together so that the issues could be fleshed out. The ask was very clear, and any questions about the ask could be reciprocated with additional questions and clarifications. So this is the opportunity to do it, and we may be at that point now, but if there's further questions.
So as we sit now, where are we? If nothing changes, what will be the procedure?
Well, right now, the language that we spent quite a while getting to was that the fees that would be paid are those fees that are in the schedule. At the time a permit's pulled or, the activity is commencing. So that's where we're at right now. That itself, the expectation is that those fees do increase with inflation and increased costs and that sort of thing. And so they're not fixed, but there should be a basis for that increase that correlates to what, increased costs are. And that's where we've come up with that CPI plus 1% figure. But we're not, that's where that comes from. So that's where we're at present. I think, obviously the ask is,
More certainty.
yeah, I mean, some additional, clarification on that particular issue or some particular language in the agreement that is more than the fees, that are in the schedule at the time of the activity commencing or the permit being pulled, which is where we're at.
Do we have any report, or maybe we could generate it, if we went back in time 10 years, of when our fees were there, going forward with the two different ideas, and see, are we really close, or is there a larger difference?
We can put together that math for you, but yes, you guys have not been increasing your fees at CPI plus 1. The rational nexus has been considerably below that.
So even if we stayed with the CPI plus 1, it's still more than what we've done in the past. Is that correct?
We have not been updating our fees,
Annually?
well, certainly not, more regular recently, but there's been significant periods of times where that has not been updated, and that mostly preceded the tenure of the last couple of administrations. But yeah, that was not something that was consistently applied.
Go back to our last Nexus report and what we've done since.
And have an idea of how far apart are we really talking?
Yeah.
And if I understand what we're talking about, it should be an automatic increase each and every year. And I'm going to say on January 1 or whatever the right date is. But the whole point is the CPI is an annual situation. And so that should be recognized.
Yeah, if I remember right.
And it's
When the,
mixed.
What we're proposing is a guardrail on the high end. So the CPI plus 1's the guardrail. Whatever your rational nexus is, which is probably well below that, is probably, however you guys choose to increase your fees based upon that.
if I remember right, when we had the
Commissioner's
last
discussion.
Nexus report, we were given this range or this number is justified, and I think we set them below that number at that point because the number that was justified was truly to me, outrageous. If you were an individual homeowner just building your own home, it's hard to turn around and say, now you owe us another $9,500 because in the future your house impacts 29 feet of county road somewhere that might need to be improved. And so I know we've been trying to balance, treat everybody fair, whether you're a developer of your own home or a developer of a community, that we're not widely separate there either. But so, like I said, our Nexus plus CPI plus 1% is really a Nexus minus, and plus the CPI plus. And I'm not sure where that gets us, but I guess I am still honestly struggling a little bit with the purpose of the impact fee is to address it. The construction required to address impacts of a new community or new development to the county more broadly. I'm not trying to negate the tremendous benefit of if we started doing some aquifer recharge. There's a tremendous long-term benefit to just seeing that technology grow and improve and be in place, but if it takes away from that 29 feet of road that is impacted somewhere in the area, we still have to make up that difference too, so. And I'm not sure if there, I guess, Dallas's comment about going back and looking where we're at based just even to the last report that was done and the fee setting since then, I think would be useful to us, because
Would you mind if I spoke to the roads point just super briefly?
yeah, please.
I think I understand your concern with the impact fees and the roads for new development, but I think you have also made a policy change that says for these larger developments, they are to take on their own interior road maintenance in perpetuity. So those roads aren't hitting your ledgers and aren't hitting your budgets. So that mitigates the concern you have there also. That is all being taken care of by that developer, by those metro districts.
That's a fair point. Thank you.
So to that point, we would probably need to include whatever our look back, what our also maintenance costs on those roads that we have accepted in subdivisions are, to make it.
We could get pretty
There's a-
exotic if we wanted to, but I think trying to compare one to one is going to be important, and kind of seeing what the difference. I think what you're interested in particular is what that difference in potential revenue to the county could be if you're looking at the extremes on that. And so, I know I probably wouldn't be able to do the math on that, but I'm sure somebody could.
Yeah, that's exactly right. If we're arguing just over semantics on how it works out, and then the numbers are pretty comparable at the end, then we're wasting time. But if there's a large discrepancy, then it's something that we need to continue to work with. But until we know those harder numbers to see where we're at, I think we're.
And I think our concern is just making sure that there never is a large discrepancy.
I understand that.
And I think today was to open the conversation, and we so appreciate you doing that. Is there a specific ask that we can help provide more information for?
Yeah, Claire, I obviously a decision's not going to be made today, but I'm sure that the dialogue between you and I can kind of flesh those particular issues out, and any asks that we have as far as information or data or calculation, we can certainly discuss that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think if we wanted to just kind of look at numbers over the last 5 years, I think if, certainly we have the numbers within the building department. I know you do. I think if we look back at perhaps the construction that's gone on in Independence plus Spring Valley and applied Nexus plus inflation plus 1% over the period since our last Nexus report versus what we, at least would give us some numbers to look at.
Go ahead, Claire.
Yeah.
And if I could just ask that when you look at the numbers, the other critical piece of what I would ask that you weigh and evaluate is that what we're looking at are public benefits projects are also weighing into this. So it's not just the revenue the county is getting from the impact fees, it's the benefits of this attainable housing, affordable housing, water infrastructure, road updating, parks. All of that has to factor into this equation.
No, I agree, but I just want to say it's not about just money flowing into a bank account. The impact fees are used to address those or many of those issues by the county, so it is flowing back into projects of public benefit, not new furniture or carpeting, so.
What has been a typical CPI for the last few years? 4 or 5%, 6%?
3 to 5.
3 to 5. So then that would mean 4 to 6% if it stayed in that range, an annual adjustment to the fees.
Again, as the top guardrail, yeah.
No, we've talked on many different issues. Having the hard data is always makes it easier to evaluate. So I would look forward to seeing that done.
I think we've got our homework, right? Anything else that we need to clarify?
I guess in the numbers, I know, like I said, we didn't take the maximum supported number from the Nexus report. So I think having that as a second baseline of what a different board's decision might have been if we started at a higher baseline.
I think it's important to understand that a Nexus study will provide a range, and as we well know, that the maximum of that range was not adopted by the board. It could have been, it wasn't. And so taking a look at what that could be, sure, that might be important as well. That's correct. Yeah.
Seems like we were somewhere in the 2/3
Yes.
of the increase range, or half the increase range, because it was dramatic after 10 years.
Okay.
Is there anything else you need to tell us?
Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Claire. Sorry you had to stare at a blank screen.
I know it's a little disconcerting. It's like hearing the voice of God in my house.
All right, well, thank you much. So I guess it's
Have a good day.
11:15, and that concludes the workshop. Thank you.